to the Nap Time Podcast. I'm Emily Schoolfield, and I'm very grateful to have you joining me on this Monday morning. Today's podcast topic, I feel like the Lord really put on my heart, not necessarily for me to share with you guys, but maybe for me to learn very in-depthly as I research this topic and share it as well. Just kind of processing my own head and how I tend to just struggle through and try to overcome worry, anxiety, and fear. And that's the title of today's episode. I will tell you that this morning I had a different topic in mind that I was going to cover. But as I started to get into it, I wasn't really coming up with a lot of detail. I didn't really feel like it was a super important topic to which I could speak about for about an hour. So I just kind of stopped and I prayed and I was like, Lord, please just give me a good topic to cover today. And he knows what he's doing, doesn't he? So this topic, I think is so near and dear to me because it changes over time. And worry, anxiety, and fear is something that I believe we all experience as humans because it's part of our human nature. And it's something that God talks about to us in the Bible, not necessarily saying that the fact that it exists is a bad thing, but how we deal with it and how we tend to hold on to it and just get so attached to this idea of creating a safety net for ourselves versus reaching out to Him. That's kind of what I want to talk about today. I think that motherhood has been one of the most anxiety-ridden versions of Emily that I've ever experienced. I mean, if we're talking postpartum specifically, I remember, for at least the first couple of months, the whole intrusive thought thing would come into my head, and the thoughts I would have were just so dark and so terrifying to think about. Things like I'd be standing on the back porch and holding Valerie and thinking, oh no, what if I drop her? And it's like, well, why would I drop her? She's wrapped to me. I'm holding onto there's no way I'm going to drop her off of the back porch. But these just fears and anxieties would come into my head and really cloud my mind. And then for the rest of the day, I would just be in this very wounded animal kind of headspace, I guess, where everything just kind of felt like a threat and I never felt safe or comfortable and I couldn't relax, and just all these different emotions that would come in. And it's just, it's so much to process at once. And I feel like the time in which I was breastfeeding too, anytime I would hear Valerie cry, my mind this is how we're wired to just cognitively respond immediately. And during those moments, I would just have this fear of, what if she's thinking I'm abandoning her? Or what if, if I don't feed her right now, just my body would go crazy. Like my brain would go crazy. And we'd be driving somewhere and Kate would be like, well, I can stop in like half an hour. I'm like, no, I cannot sit here and listen to her for a half an hour. Like it is physically hurting me. And it's such a weird thing to go through postpartum as a mom. And I think I see that continually growing and just kind of reshaping itself in different aspects now when it comes to Valerie visiting the grandparents' house or, being under someone else's care when I'm not there. And just all those fears and anxieties that just come right back and just worry and constantly worrying about what is going to happen. So I wanted to really cover this topic today with the main mindset being faced towards how we worry or have anxiety and fear in the time of life of being a mother. And for me, I can only really speak to younger kids, but I can understand how older kids would work. And I think that the tools that I've kind of found here and been able to just kind of uncover through reading the book Fighting Fear with Faith by Allie Worthington and some other things that I've found, I think will really be applicable to all stages of life. Because, no matter what time of life you're in, the tools in which God gives us to face our fears and to have a faithful understanding of Him and to put our worries and anxieties on Him, I believe will look the same. And I think, obviously we'll be changing and morphing and as we grow closer to Christ, but just the overarching idea right here, I think is going to be applicable to many of us. So one thing that moms have to battle constantly is worry. And I'm going to kind of break apart the differences of worry, anxiety, and fear because I think those can all be kind of categorized in different places as far as where those fit into our day-to-day. But it's something that we're going to experience all the time. I think that for me, being a just adult person, things that I would fear or more just, walking alone at night, and I don't know, driving in a car and worrying that maybe someone else would hit me, just those kinds of things. But they weren't huge things that I worried about on a day-to-day. I think most of my anxieties came from, oh, I really want to get married one day and have babies, and like, how long is this going to take, and how do I put myself out there, and how do I, all these different things that came with accomplishments that I wanted to achieve, and just worrying about how those things would happen and the things that might set me back, and just the time it was taking. Whereas now, being a mom, the things I worry about are completely different. And I think they expand beyond our children, right? Not only do I worry about Valerie and her well-being, just her and herself, I also worry about her well-being when it comes to having clean clothes and the dishes done, and we're about to leave for a trip. So packing everything that we need for the airplane in her luggage, making sure it fits, having organic milk because she specifically needs this certain kind of milk, otherwise her body gets a weird reaction, and just all these different things that will kind of flood my brain. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily bad things to think about, but the worry that I create up front is not necessarily helping me accomplish the goal. Instead, it's clouding my mind and just creating this moment of anxiety and just stress and just, oh, okay, I just gotta get this done. So kind of working through how I would solve those things with these next couple points. But one thing that I think we need to acknowledge is how different women and men are, right? Women tend to internalize these emotions, whereas men more react externally. Maybe they'll have anger, things that you can kind of visibly see in just the way that they are either standing or their body language, maybe how they convey themselves with those emotions. Whereas women are more internal, and sometimes you won't even know what's going on in a woman's head. I know for Cade, he's trying to figure me out, and it's not going to happen. Like, you can't know what I'm thinking by looking at me in a lot of these moments. But women tend to internalize those things, pull back a lot, and definitely become depressed. I think that's a huge thing, and that's kind of a buzzword in today's society. So I'm not going to really break that down too often, but I do feel like depression is kind of the side effect of these emotions that we might feel, where we just kind of get caught up in this very internalized just ball of fear and feeling like we can't really do anything, or we're just stuck in it. And we tend to make safety what we're fighting for, right? So if we are in a situation where we feel unsafe or are worried or depressed or just feel like we're losing control, we're going to make safety what we want. Our goal is to get to that safe place, right? And I think that fear is not a bad thing. I mean, fear is the natural response, right? If something terrible were to happen, or someone were to barge into my apartment right now with a gun, my fear is going to be what gives me that reaction of fight or flight. And I think that's totally normal and great to have. But we need to recognize our fear and identify where it's coming from, because I think a lot of moments we take it from a 1 to a 10, not because of the one singular thing that's happening, but because of everything being piled on top of each other, giving us that higher reaction. So one of the biggest things that I think I have discovered in unpacking this is, number one, how my brain works. I think very similar to other women, again, is that internalizing. And that's something that when Cade and I first started dating, that was something that he definitely called me out on, because I would go through, just kind of ups and downs, of course, just life, and things that I would be stressed out about, whether my parents or work or school. And I had a tendency of just kind of holding on to it and staying quiet about it. And the more he would try to kind of ask me questions, I would honestly get in kind of attack mode. It wasn't like an openly sharing, like, oh yes, I want to share my emotions with you, and let's work through it together. Instead, I was very used to just kind of internalizing it and not necessarily dealing with it, but pushing it down far enough that I didn't have to go through the hurt of dealing with it or even just acknowledge it. And of course, for those of you who are married or been in any serious relationship, you know that that is not how it works. And so Cade definitely had to be patient with me, but he called me out on a lot of things. And I think that it was really great to have him as a friend at that point in time, and not necessarily anything serious, but just to help me recognize how internalized and how many things are internalized and how I needed to work through those things, and to be able to lean on him. Such a huge deal and such a help in our marriage now. But first off, I just want to ask the question of, how do I know I'm struggling with anxiety? There might be some of you who are like, yeah, I mean, I've got a whole list of things to do, but it's not anxiety necessarily. It's not anything serious. Or there might be some of you that feel like you're kind of struggling with a serious anxiety. And one of the biggest ways you can kind of test yourself to know, am I struggling with anxiety, is does it impede your everyday life? And this could be physical. This could also just be mentally. And one of the biggest things for me that I can kind of test is Valerie took a really bad fall. When was this? A couple months back. And she hit her head on the ground, and I obviously flipped out because I'm like, oh my goodness, my daughter have a concussion? Like, what's going on? This is horrible. The fact that I couldn't catch her, I felt terrible. And that created a lot of anxiety for me when it came to her being outside past that, or her being on the couch, or her being in the kitchen, standing on her toddler tower without me around. And those kind of things. And that started to impede my everyday life because I was constantly worrying about it. And every time I would worry, I would just have that flashback to that moment of her falling and just, it's horrible. And that started to affect me daily in my just mental headspace. And I started to kind of become a little, I guess you would say, overprotective of her and what she would do because I was just so worried about this happening again. And that is one of the major things I can think of that caused me anxiety. I would say most other things are just kind of a day-to-day, unless it involves planning, like planning for this trip. I definitely feel like that's an anxiety because I'm just constantly revisiting that list. And so this is why this topic is just so perfect right now, because I feel like God's like, hey, Emily, why are we studying this? How are we going to work on it? But I want to say that anxiety and worry are very different. So anxiety, the way that we tend to deal with it is going to be to fix and control everything. We're going to try to kind of cover up the worry that we're feeling of unknowns in the future and take a hold of those, and again, take control in order to make a safety, quote unquote, so that we feel more comfortable, or we feel like, okay, yes, this crazy thing is happening, but I'm in control, so I can, decide how it's going to work out. And I think a great example of this that Allie Worthington shares is Martha in the Bible. Luke, she's getting ready for Jesus to come, and she's preparing and working hard to get her house ready. And her sister Mary is just kind of sitting there. But in a way, they're both serving the Lord. I think this is a good example of, when I have people coming over to my house, I'm running around like a crazy person, like, Kate, we got to get this done, like empty out the trash can, move the shoes, all these different things to prepare for them to come. But the anxiety that I have of, having to have this perfect image or this perfect house ready for people to come in, just because, nobody wants to walk into a messy house. I don't like walking into my own house messy. But it's just, that's how we kind of deal with that anxiety, is by taking control and, trying to get everything done. But being stuck in this anxiety and stress, I think that all of us as women, I know I can say it for myself, we tend to blame our husbands, right? So we get so caught up in just trying to take control of everything that we also falter in the blame game. And we need to have somebody to blame. And it can't be us, right? Because we're taking control of the situation. Clearly, we're not causing the situation. And Cade tends to be the one in the direct line of fire because he's here. And he's not as anxious or stressed out as I am. So clearly, he doesn't understand the weight of what's going on around me. And I think that we tend to use words like don't, should have, never, always, and all those just horrible words that aren't going to get you anywhere in a discussion with your spouse. And your kids are witnessing this too. You might have a shorter temper and it's just going to get taken out on everybody. So this is why it's so important that you identify, number one, when you're in this headspace, and number two, instead of attacking your husband because you are on the same team, and this is where I'm going to say, like, Kate and I, this is our little motto whenever we start attacking each other is, hey, same team, like, chill out. Like, I'm with you here. Why are you coming at me? But instead sharing what you're feeling and getting those emotions out, and just sharing the stress or anxiety that you might have in the moment, and just praying through it with your spouse instead of the anger and blame game, because you're not going to get anywhere with that. Instead, things are going to escalate to higher than they should have ever been. And again, a great example of this was this last night. Seriously, we were sitting on the couch, and Kate was like, oh, I'm so excited for the trip coming up. I can't wait to, clock out of work and then have to worry about nothing. And he doesn't know this, but for the last 5 days, I have been just creating a list and just been overwhelmed with the fact that we're going on a vacation, right? And the fact that when we get back from our vacation, on the exact same day we get back, we are signing the lease for our next apartment. But this is a week or a month before we lose our current place. So we're double paying rent that month. And I got to coordinate water, power, electric, that is power, yes, Wi-Fi, just all those different things. I got to make sure Val's got toddler snacks for the airplane. This whole list of things that are going in my head that Kate's not witnessing. But that's not what I said. What I said was, yeah, I'm really excited for this trip too, although I don't really feel like, I'm clocking out, but I'm excited to take this craziness elsewhere and be able to see people. And I do think that was kind of my way of kind of a cry for help. Like, well, who do you think you are? Like, come on, we got stuff to do. Don't pretend like we're just clocking off and going on a vacation. Like, well, I'm a mom now. Vacation does not exist the same way it used to. But being in a very unhealthy headspace and just overwhelmed, he kind of replied to me and he's like, well, you need to just calm down, just relax, and just enjoy your vacation. If you spend so much time worrying, you want people to enjoy it. And that was not the answer I needed. And again, the very overwhelmed headspace I was in. So that resulted in just a very aggressive response from me of just kind of creating a list of everything that's going on in my head and being like, what do you mean just sit back and relax, Kate? Who's going to get this done? Not you. And of course, that is not where we need to be. So do not take my example as, hey, this is what you should be doing. Instead, take it as, oh, wow, this is what I should not be doing. And the longer we talked, the more I was able to share what was on my mind. And Cade just kind of said, hey, I had no idea that you were worrying about these things. I'm like, yeah, every day I'm worrying about this amount of things and doing this, this, and this. And I know that you work really hard and I'm perfectly capable of running a household. So I'm able to do that, without having to lean on him for help in a lot of things in this current time of life. But I think that I was just kind of attacking him for the issues that I was creating on my own, right? They were actually issues. Prepping for a trip is not a stressful thing, it can be stressful. Let me reword that. Prepping for a trip should be exciting, right? I'm not prepping for something that's like, oh my goodness, I gotta go take a test on Monday and study. That is, nobody wants to do that. But I had to just take a moment to take a breath. And I think by explaining to him everything that was going on in my mind, I was able to take that internalization of everything that I was worried about and, all this anxiety that I had in me and actually say it and getting it out of my head instead of it just spinning constantly. I was able to breathe. I feel like for the first time all week, just kind of be like, hey, this is everything that I'm doing this week. And, it's not that I need help from him. I'm perfectly capable of getting it all done. But I think I just needed to say it out loud and to create more of a paper list of what I need to get done. Because we don't get to turn off our brains. I am so jealous of Cade, the fact that he can literally just shut off his brain. He can think about nothing. What is that? I cannot think about nothing. We go to bed and I've already got a list of what I'm going to do when I wake up. Gotta make Val's bottle, give her vitamins, make some eggs, all these different things as I'm falling asleep. Which is also such a positive though, to be grateful for. Women are killer multitaskers. The amount of things I can get done in an hour versus what Cade can get done in an hour is pretty insane. And that's no fault to him. I mean, he's even said wow, Emily, it's insane how much you can get done. And I understand that he's got a one-track mind. If he's working on a project, he's got to put his whole self into that project. But the fact that, I can cook dinner, take care of Valerie, think about other things, make a phone call, all that kind of stuff is really such a gift because you need 10 hands to get done what is required for a household. And so I want to speak to all you mamas who get very overwhelmed and just really encourage the outward, processing. Again, being more of an introverted person, I just tend to be internal in all of my thinking and processing. It takes a while when I want to come up with an opinion or a perspective on a situation or recount, emotions and what was felt and what was said. It's going to be internal. But for some things, I can't process it internally. And that's where I really need either a really close friend, an accountability partner, a counselor, or my husband to go to and to be able to share those things with them. And I definitely encourage you to recognize that in yourself. And instead of just living in it and having to struggle with this on a day-to-day, recognize what's causing it and just get it out. Write it down, scream it, pray out loud, just all these different things so that you can actually see it versus just spinning in your head. Because again, you cannot turn off your head. I will rethink the same thing 12 times a day because it's just spinning in there until it happens, and then I can write it off. So definitely an important thing to think about. Another thing I want to talk about is how fear and worry have a difference. So we just spoke about anxiety and kind of how that can affect us, but now we're worry and fear and their differences. So worry is going to always be future-based. If you're worried about something that's going to happen, like getting your blood drawn at the doctor, it's not actively happening, but you're worrying about what it's going to feel like, or you're worried about how it's going to go because you're just creating up these scenarios in your head. You haven't actually experienced it yet. Whereas fear is going to be the natural fight or flight response, as I spoke about. If someone were to break into my apartment right now, my fight or flight response is going to be present tense. So worry is going to be future-based, whereas fear is going to be more present-based. And how can we deal with this? So as a mom, worry is going to be something that I experience constantly. Like I told you in the beginning stages, I had the, what's the word? Oh my goodness, I just had it. I can't think of it. I'm so sorry. I had the fear of things that were going to happen to Valerie. And just all the negatives that would kind of flood my brain. Nothing actually was happening, but it was just a worry about what's going to happen. This is something that is still continuing on a day-to-day basis. So when I have somebody who is going to babysit, like let's say my brother, right? I'm going to worry about what is going to happen. What if the fire alarm goes off while I'm gone? What if she chokes on a grape and he doesn't know how to get it out? What if, all these different things that are happening? Then you got to kind of break it down. Okay. Is this likely? Is it likely the fire alarm is going to off? Not really. Does Caden know what to do in the situation where there is a fire? Yes, he will pick up Valerie and he will get out of the apartment. So is that worry something that's actually something I should be worrying about? Or is that something that I need to just give to God and pray that he helps me to work through and just let go? That will be a situation where you want to let it go. Now, Valerie choking on a grape. Is this something that is likely? Valerie eating grapes, she hasn't choked in, I think, ever when she's eaten a grape. I mean, she's choked while she's eaten before, but she's got teeth and she's pretty good at chewing. So it's not very likely. It's a possibility, but it's not very likely. So how worried do I need to be about it? Well, if I still feel like it's something that could happen and that isn't dangerous, to just kind of give Caden a one-over of, hey, pick her up, flip her over your arm, hit her back as hard as you can till it gets out of her airway. Just make sure while she's eating that you're watching her. Once I tell him this, right, I don't need to revisit it. So if he were to babysit her in the future and I was worrying about, oh my goodness, what if she chokes on a grape? What if she chokes on this? What if this happens? Well, at that point, that worry, number one, is not likely. But number two, Caden also has an understanding of how to take care of Valerie in that situation. So that is a worry that I just need to pray through, give to God, and let go. And you'll find when you let those things go, your whole mind is changed. You feel a lot lighter. And this is what we're called to do. We're called to give him our worries and anxieties. And these are just two very small situations. But I mean, from a day to day, there are going to be so many situations, right? And so we need to be able to break those down, figure out, okay, where is this worry coming from? How likely is this worry? And can I find a solution for a worry? Or do I need to do something about a worry because it's very likely and I need to help avoid it? The reason we need to avoid reacting to all of these worries is that if we get so strung up in worries and things that we create in our head that we think are likely to happen or going to happen, we can cause them to happen. Our worries don't only affect us, they're going to affect our children because they're going to be aware of our worries and things that we're trying to avoid, and they are going to get the negative consequence of that. But we can also just cause extra worry for our kids because they're going to also worry about things that might not be necessary for them to worry about, or instances that might not even happen. So it is our job as moms to use our emotional intelligence of understanding situations, understanding things that can happen, and understanding how to deal with those so that our kids don't have to, because they are not at the same emotional intelligence level as we are. And I think we also need to avoid what makes us uncomfortable and gives us these worries or even fear. Social media is fantastic for its ability to share information. As I've said many times, I think it's great. The fact that I can do this podcast is awesome. 10 years ago, totally different story. However, because of that, we are also going to be bombarded with so much information, and a lot of that information is going to be fear-mongering. So we need to be vigilant in what we expose ourselves to. For example, when I would say the most fearful or just worried I've ever been, probably in my life, was around the time that Val was 6 months old, because she was starting to get a lot more active, able to move. I was starting to feed her solid foods. I was worried about her diet, just all these different things. And then development-wise, like, is she developing correctly? Is she behind? Is there something that I'm doing wrong? What do I do to help her with just seeing contrast images, doing it, play with her more, just all these different things, which as a mom, we want to check all of the boxes, but this can instead create a lot of worry. And I would find that watching videos of moms who were doing it correctly, or what I perceived as correctly, watching these videos of moms who did it all, would just kind of add to me thinking of things that I'm not doing, that I should be doing, that I need to be doing. Or, oh my gosh, her kid is eating this, this, and this, and Valerie can't even do this. Or, oh my goodness, just got recalled, Honey Bunches of Oats and Cheerios are no longer allowed in the UK because of something, something, something. So all these different things that I'd be exposed to, which aren't bad to be aware of, but when it's coming at you at such a high speed and you are trying to do absolutely everything, you are going to just put yourself in this worry-wart state of mind and just create so much fear, because you start with the worry of wondering, oh, what's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with this? Then when you look at your daughter and she's eating Cheerios that you just read recalled, it's going to put you in a whole different mode. And so I think that, again, in those situations, we need to take those and wonder, where's the worry coming from? What of this is factual? What of this is likely? And how are we going to deal with it? And to break it down into those 3 steps rather than just reacting on a whim, because worry can easily create fear, right? You're worrying about something in the future and then boom, you're living it. You're processing it right now. How are you reacting in that moment? And so this is something that we need to be very careful about. And again, our children's responses to these situations are going to be solely based on what they see in us, right? Because mom and dad are the safe space. We are their safe place. And we should not be sharing our anxieties with them or putting those things on them, because again, they're just not in the same emotional area to where they can handle these kinds of things, these huge things that we're dealing with. So we need to be very careful when we are in moments of fear, anxiety, or just worry, that we lean on someone else who can help us work through these things. Again, a friend, a spouse, an accountability partner, or a counselor, because our kids are not it. So we need to be very careful to also be that level of protection for them, while they'll also, get to witness how we do work through things that do happen. Maybe you're worried about your child choking, and they do choke, and then your older child sees how you deal with it. That would be a situation where they're going to witness it, but you're not going to ask them for help or ask them how to do it or how you could have done it better, because that's not what your kids are there for. And I think that we put that into other scenarios where it seems more appropriate, I guess, to kind of ask your kids about those kinds of things, and it's not. And your kids are not your emotional stability. So we need to be very aware of that, especially when we are in this moments of maybe not thinking clearly and more just bombarded again with being overwhelmed and all these different things that are going on, right? I'm not going to lean on Valerie and be like, hey, mommy's really overwhelmed. I need you to help me figure out how to pack. She's, what? She doesn't even know what I'm saying. But even in 10 years from now, that's something that I need to instead create steps for and ask you for help with specifics. Like, hey, can you pack your shirts for me? Or can you do this for me? Instead of just sharing a worry of, oh my goodness, I'm so scared, I'm not going to pack the right things, because that's not something that she needs to be worrying about. And that's something that I, of a higher emotional intelligence and ability, should be able to work through on my own or with help from those who can help me. So Another thing that I want us to acknowledge is John 10:10, right? This is a great verse, I think, for this scenario. It says, "A thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy." And the second half is what I want you to listen to. "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." And I think a lot of us ask that question of, okay, well, if God loves us, why do we go through all these negatives? Why do we go through all these terrible situations? And the word that I want to emphasize on this verse is the full, right? To fully understand. How do you create a full understanding? He offers us freedom to the fullest, but we can only know what that means because we've been enslaved. We have that full perspective of what's been happening. We see the downs and we are promised the uplifting moments, and we have hope for those moments in every down season. But you can't have a full perspective on something or a full understanding of something without seeing both sides of it. And I think that is just such a huge piece that we need to understand as Christians, is these moments of worry, anxiety, and fear are not moments where the Lord is leaving us. These are moments when we need to call on Him. And this is just what happens with life, the sin in the world, and just all the terrible things that we hear around us. We need to be reminded that He loves us and He wants us to have the full, but we need to fully understand what that means. And freedom, there's two sides to it. We are going to have those downs and those ups, as I said. So I wanted to speak on that specifically with this topic, because I don't think that we should sit in frustration with the Lord for these things that we are dealing with. Instead, we should lean on Him to work through them, because I learned everything in a down season, right? All these downs that you go through, you don't want to be down there. You don't want to be struggling through it. You're so quick. We are so quick to try to just get to that up and try to succeed and finish something and, work out of it. But those moments when we are in the down is how we can understand God and the love and grace He has for us, and be hopeful for what He promises in the future. And another thing I just was reminded of, that I meant to speak on a little bit earlier regarding social media, was the sharing of information of how easy it is to see different things like car crashes, or know when a murder has happened, or know when a kidnapping has happened, all these different kinds of things. It's really a big deal because, I don't know, even 20 years ago, it's not like my mom knew every murder that happened around us when she let us go outside and play. I think this plagues us with a lot of anxiety, to just be fearful for our children and what they're going to experience and what's out there, and trying to be overprotective of that. And so again, that's where we need to really break down our worry to establish where it comes from. And I'm not saying it's easy. If anything, I'm just saying that this makes it that much harder. But to also just avoid what makes us uncomfortable. If you're living in a very safe neighborhood, and you're reading about all these terrible crimes that are happening like 10, 15 minutes from you, maybe that's not something you should be filling your head with every morning before you let your kids go outside to play. Maybe instead you need to acknowledge that, yes, these things do happen in the world, but I need to give it to God, because whatever happens to my children is His will. And He is a part of taking care of them just as much as you are. Sit outside and watch your kids, to help remove just that fear of what might happen when you're not looking. Just some small ideas. But I to that point, I just want to say that I really do understand how difficult this is. And that's why it is so important that we find the truth in God, because we can worry about what ifs all day long. I am very creative. I could come up with many what ifs that you would look at me and be like, Emily, what? Like, where did you come up with this? But again, that's why I need to be reminded of the truth. And so on the truth, I think the steps that we should take once we have established that, okay, this worry is unlikely and I need to give it to the Lord. We need to take a deep breath and ask what you are actually afraid of, because I believe that all of these worries come from a place of fear that is very, very real. Maybe something that happened to you when you were younger, something that you've experienced, something that has just kind of been internalized for so long, and is affecting the way that you perceive things. And the only way we can do that is by, again, working through those things. One of the greatest things that I have heard is to surround yourself with reminders. In Matthew 11:30, the Lord says, "For my yoke is easy, my burden is light." And I think that is such a great verse to have as a reminder, whether you write it on your mirror or a sticky note you put around your house, or I know it's super cheesy, but you get all those Southern Hobby Lobby verses that you can put on your walls. But I think having those reminders around you and having scripture so close to your heart will just help remind you of the truth and the truth that is in the Bible. I believe, again, that, all these negatives in the world are going to fill your head, and all these what ifs that you can create based on what either the enemy puts in your mind or just you yourself are able to come up with. But the truth is what we need to be reminded of. And we need to unpack where our fear comes from, and what truth or what lie are associated with it. So examining your thoughts, especially looking at the what ifs, is going to be one of the examining your thoughts, especially the what ifs, is going to be one of the most helpful things you can do for yourself. Getting it out of your head versus brooding of just thinking them over and over again is so exhausting, guys. Like I've said, I can have the same thought floating in my head and just rethink it over and over and over again. But why is it still there? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. Is it still there because it hasn't happened, or because we haven't completed a task, or because we haven't received any truth on why it's false? And those kinds of things you can't do until you get it out of your head. So I definitely encourage you. I think writing it down for me, again, I learned by doing, but writing something on paper, it gets it out of my head and onto paper, and it's so much easier to see. This week, for example, getting ready for the trip, last night I was just struggling with everything going round and round that I needed to do. So I just pulled out our calendar and I was like, all right, I got 4 days. When am I going to get this done? I can record the podcast this day. I can get the power and water turned on this day. I can reach out to this person this day. I can be here this day. And putting it into a calendar, I'm no longer thinking about what I need to do. This morning I woke up, looked at the calendar. I'm like, all right, what am I doing today? Podcast at noon? Cool, got it. And then I'm no longer worrying about everything else that's happening in the background, because instead I have a written out just agenda for what I want to do. And I think that's one of the main stressors that we deal with as moms, from meal planning to just planning out our weeks. And that's why I think just having a planner, for me, it has to be written down. My phone is just a box. I can only see what it shows me at a certain period of time. I need the full picture, which for me is writing it down. So I definitely encourage you to have that and to just plan out your week versus worrying about what could happen or how it could happen or things you could miss. Just take that away from yourself, and instead just put it down on paper and just alleviate that worry. You no longer have to worry about the what if, because you have a plan, and you're just going to take it one day at a time. And I think that is very helpful to us as moms, because our brains are just constantly going and going and going. And so once we can get things out of there, it can be a lot clearer to see what's actually going on. And again, to Kate's point of enjoying the trip, yes, I was enjoying my vacation. And now that I have a plan for how I'm going to prepare for that vacation, I know that when I get on the airplane, I will have everything I need to deal with everything in the moment as it happens. So I'm not going to be but worried about if I have snacks or if she's going to sleep or this and this, because I have what I need to deal with it. And again, those are things that I will continuously pray to the Lord to help give me wisdom on, is preparation and just organization, because again, he is a very organized God, and I try very much to be like him in that way, to have order, but without taking control into my own hands, instead giving it to him, and just being able to rest in that. So that is one example of how my what ifs, writing it down, getting it out of my head, reviewing the Bible and when it tells us, Philippians 4:6-7, very popular verse, says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God." And again, that's not saying that we're not going to have anxiety, right? This says, do not be anxious about anything. Instead, give it to God and be thankful and let your requests be known. And it continues to go on to say, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, which is just such a great reminder that we don't need to know it all, right? The peace of God, it surpasses all understanding. We will not understand it. We don't have to. We don't have to have total control and visibility of everything that's going on. We don't have to worry about that. We can give it to him. We can give all our anxieties to him, and he has the story. He's writing the story, and we can just rest in it. And I just hope that can be an uplifting moment of peace, a reminder to you of how great our God is. And to just give all of your worries, all of your anxieties, and all of your fears to him, because he calls us to give those to him. He is there, and he is our greatest ally, our greatest helper. And it's just all good things. So that is one message I feel like God has definitely put on my heart today. Again, very real with what's happening in my life currently. And I just hope that this can be applicable to you as well, because anxiety, worry, fear, stress, we could keep the list going, just different words, buzzwords for these things. It's going to be something that is constantly encountered. It's not going to be something that goes away. You always have something that you need to do, something that needs to happen. But I don't think we should see that as a negative. I think we should rejoice in these gifts that we are given and these tasks that we have been given by God, and the fact that we don't have to do it by ourselves, and that we can give all worries and those things to him when we feel stuck or anxious about completing it. That he not only gives us these gifts, but he's there for us through and through. And again, the reminder of, if you are in a down spot, a rough spot, just an all-time low, just lean on him. You are in a great moment of learning, a great moment of realizing that you are human and that we need him. And he is there waiting for you with open arms. Again, as we talked about in the prayer episode, you don't need to make an appointment. He is always ready for you. So make sure that you free yourself up so you can also be available to him. Well, I think that is about all that I have. I know that it's easier said than done. I can say that for sure. But if you have any further questions or insight, or if you're going through a hard time, I would definitely love to just speak with you and connect with you. And thank you so much to those of you who do reach out and share their current times of life. It's always great for me to hear that, I'm not alone as I make these podcasts. But I'm very grateful for the time that I've been able to have today to do this, and the lack of worry that I have about getting it done because God has made it possible. So let that be an inspiration to you. And I will speak with all of you next Monday.